Hey guys. Okay, so I had to video this in a place where I could plug in my phone and it could be charging like while it's videoing. And so I'm kind of crunched up here on the bed getting ready to read to you. But where we left off, Peter was reading a book about like women and girls, and for whatever reason his family like forbid him to read that book. Okay, and Peter was so determined to read this book anyway that he kept getting it and sneaking off to the attic to read it. Okay, and probably usually when somebody tells us that we cannot do something, for whatever reason, it makes us want to do it even more, doesn't it? Okay, so let's go ahead and where we left off. I'm going to go ahead. He was very angry, took the book away, and thought that that would finish the whole business. However, he had not allowed for his son's curiosity, which waxed rather than waned because of his father's attitude. Peter, determined to finish, thought of a way to get a hold of this enthralling book. In the meantime, Miss Van Daan had asked Mummy what she thought about it all. Mummy thought that this particular book was not suitable for Margot, but she saw no harm in letting her read most books. There is a great difference, Miss Van Daan, said Mummy, between Margot and Peter. In the first place, Margot is a girl, and girls are always more grown up than boys. And secondly, Margot has read quite a lot of serious books and does not go in search of things that are forbidden. And thirdly, Margot is far more developed and intelligent, shown by the fact of her being in the 4th form at school. Now, Mrs. Van Daan agreed, but still thought it was wrong in principle to let children read books that were meant for grown-ups. In the meantime, Peter had found a time of the day when no one bothered him or the book. 7:30 in the morning. Then everyone was in the private office listening to the radio. That was when he took his treasure to the attic again. He should have been downstairs again by 8:30, but because the book was so thrilling, he forgot the time and was just coming downstairs as his father came into the room. You can imagine the consequences. With a slap and a snatch, the boy lay on the table and the book laid on the table, and Peter was in the attic. That's how matters stood as we sat down to the table. Peter stayed upstairs. No one bothered about him, and he had to go to bed without any supper. We went on with the meal, chattering gaily, when suddenly we heard a piercing whistle, and we all stopped eating and looked with pale, changed faces one to another. Then we heard Peter's voice calling down from the chimney, "I say, I'm not coming down anyway." Mr. Van Daan sprang to his feet. His napkin fell to the floor, and scarlet in the face, he shouted, "I've had enough of this." Daddy took his arm, afraid of what might happen, and the two men went together in the attic. After a good deal of resistance and stamping, Peter landed up in his room with his door closed, and we went on eating. Mrs. Van Daan wanted to save one slice of bread for the poor boy, but his father stood firm. If he doesn't apologize soon, then he is going to have to sleep in the attic. Loud protests from the rest of us, as we thought missing supper was quite enough the punishment. Besides, Peter might catch a cold and we couldn't call a doctor. Peter did not apologize. He was already in the attic. Mr. Van Daan did nothing more about it, but I did notice the next morning that Peter's bed had been slept in. Peter was back in the attic at 7 o'clock, but Daddy managed with a few friendly words to persuade him to come down again. Sour faces and obstinate silences for 3 days, and then everything went smoothly once more. Yours, Anne. So they were kind of getting a big family fight while they were hiding, weren't they? Monday, September 21st, 1942. Dear Kitty, I'm going to tell you our general news. Mrs. Van Daan is unbearable. I get nothing but blow-ups from her for my continuous chatter. She is always pestering us in some way or another. This is the latest. She doesn't want to wash up the pans if there is a fragment left. Instead of putting it in a glass dish, as we've always done and still now, she leaves it in the pan to go bad. After the next meal, Margot sometimes has about 7 pans to wash up, and then Madam says, well, Margot, you have a lot to do. I'm busy with Daddy working out his family tree. As we go along, he tells me little bits about everyone. It's terribly interesting. Mr. Kufus brings a few special books for me every other week. I'm thrilled with the Jupiter Whoel series. I've enjoyed the whole of Sissy Van Mark's very much. And I've read Erie's Zombiezoid 4 times, and I still laughed about the ludicrous situations that arise. Term time has begun, and I'm working hard at my French and managed to pump in 5 irregular verbs per day. Peter sighs and groans over his English. A few school books have just arrived, and we had a good stock of exercise books, pencils, rubbers, and labels as I brought these with me. I sometimes listen to the Dutch news from London. Heard about Prince Bernard lately. He said that Princess Juliana is expecting a baby about next January. I think it is lovely. It surprises the others that I should be so keen on the royal family. I was being discussed, and they decided that I'm not completely stupid after all, which had the effect of making me work extra hard the next day. I certainly don't want to still be in the first form when I'm 14 or 15. So I'm thinking, guys, that the form must be the grade that they are in. Also, the fact that I'm hardly allowed to read any decent books was mentioned. Mummy is reading Hirine, Viroween, and Kenteche now, which I'm not allowed, but Margot is. First, I must be more developed, like my talented sister. Then we talk about my ignorance in philosophy and psychology, about which I know nothing. Perhaps by next year I shall be wiser. I looked up these difficult words quickly in the dictionary. I have just woken up to the disturbing fact that I have 1 long sleeve dress and 3 cardigans for the winter. I received permission from Daddy to knit a jumper of white sheep's wool. It's not very nice wool, but as long as it's warm, that's all that matters to me. We have some clothes deposited with friends, but unfortunately, we shall not see them until after the war. That is, if they are still even there. I had just written something about Miss Van Daan when she came. Slap! I closed the book. Hey, Anne, can I just have a look? I'm afraid not. Just the last page, then. Nope, sorry. Naturally, it gave me a frightful shock because there was a very unflattering description of her on this particular page. Yours, Anne. Friday, September 25th, 1942. Dear Kitty, yesterday evening I went upstairs and visited the Van Daans. I do so occasionally to have a chat. Sometimes it can be quite fun. Then we have some moth biscuits. The biscuit tin is kept in the wardrobe, which is full of mothballs, and drink lemonade. We talk about Peter, and I told them how Peter often strokes my cheek and that I wish he wouldn't, as I don't like being pawed by boys. In a typical way parents do. They asked if I couldn't get fond of Peter because he certainly liked me very much. I thought, oh dear. And I said, oh no, imagine it. I did say that I thought Peter was rather awkward, but that I was probably shyness, as many boys who haven't had much to do with girls are like that. I must say that the refuge committee of the secret annex Turn the page. Mail section is very ingenious. I'll tell you what they've done to get news to us through Mr. Van Dyke, Travia's chief representative, and a friend who's surprisingly hidden some of the things for us. They typed a letter to a chemist in South Zealand who does business with our firm in such a way that he has to send the enclosed reply back in an addressed envelope. Daddy addresses the envelope to the office. When this envelope arrives in Zealand, the enclosed letter is taken out and is replaced by a message in Daddy's handwriting as a sign of his life. Like this, Van Dyke won't become suspicious when he reads the note. They specifically chose Zealand because it is so close to Belgium, and the letter could have easily been smuggled over the border. In addition, no one is allowed into Zealand without a special permit. So if they thought we were there, he couldn't try and look us up. Sunday, September 27th, 1942. Dear Kitty, oh man, just had a big bust up with Mommy for the umpteenth time. We simply don't get on together these days, and Margot and I don't hit it off too well either. As a rule, we don't go in for such outbursts as this in our family. Still, by no means pleasant for me. Margot and Mummy's natures are completely strange to me. I understand my friends better than my own mother. It's too bad. We often discuss post-war problems. For example, how one ought to address servants. Miss Van Daan had another tantrum. She is terribly moody. She keeps hiding more of her private belongings, and Mummy ought to answer each Van Daan disappearance with a frank disappearance. How some people do adore bringing up other people's children in addition to their own. The Van Daans are that kind. Margot doesn't need it. She is such a goody-goody perfectionist herself. But I seem to have enough mischief in me for the two of us put together. You should hear us at mealtimes. What reprimands and cheeky answers flying to and fro. Mommy and Daddy always defend me stoutly. I'd have to give it up if it weren't for them. Although they do tell me that I mustn't talk too much and that I must be more retiring and not poke my nose into everything, still I seem doomed for failure. If Daddy wasn't so patient, I'd be afraid I was going to turn out to be a terrific disappointment to my parents, and they are pretty lenient on me. Okay, so right now kind of what's going on in this family is it sounds like they are getting on each other's nerves, okay? And that can happen in our family during quarantine. And you know, the best thing to do when you feel like you're being grouchy with your mom or grouchy with a brother or sister or something, the best thing we can do is kind of maybe go in a bedroom by ourselves and find something to do and close the door and just find some space for each other for a little bit. Because right now, we're together with our family all day and all night, every day, okay? And I know that's kind of hard. It's kind of hard here too. So find a space by yourself. Give everybody a break. When people need you to be quiet, just try to be quiet and find something to do on your own, okay? Have a great day. Bye-bye.